A story of silence. But listen closely. Connecting minds. Connecting from Africa for the world.
The first light, they said this village would never see electricity unless it came from foreign aid or corporate charity. They were wrong, painfully wrong. And today those same voices are scrambling to shut down what they once claimed was impossible. It began with a single light bulb, flickering to life on a dirt road that had been swallowed by darkness for decades. No imported machinery, no overseas contracts, no corporate logo stamped on the switch. Just power, born from the ground beneath our own feet. Within a year, that one light multiplied into thousands, enough to give every household free, clean electricity. But here's the part that rattled boardrooms and government halls alike. It was built entirely without their permission. Some called it a miracle, others a threat. And behind closed doors, industry leaders whispered the same quiet order: end it before it spreads. But this was never about a light bulb. It was about who controls the right to dream and whether a nation can power itself without kneeling to those who sell dependence as progress, the forgotten beginning. A year and a half before that first bulb lit up, this village didn't even exist on the government's electrification maps. Seriously, if you zoomed in on the Ministry of Energy's official grid plan, the whole area was just blank. The polite term they used was low priority development. Translation: don't expect power in your lifetime. Meanwhile, life here ran on smoke and wax. Kids bent over notebooks under kerosene lamps, breathing in fumes that stung their eyes. One teacher told me her students coughed more than they answered questions. A single gallon of kerosene cost the same as 5 kilos of rice, and most families had to choose between light and dinner. Petitions? Oh, they sent plenty. The ministry replied every time with the same line: your request will be reviewed in the next budget cycle. But next cycle was political code for never, because the big suppliers had already done the math. Stringing high-voltage cables out here would burn more money than it could ever earn back. Enter a crew of young engineers, locals who'd gone abroad for school and actually came back. Crazy, right? They'd seen microgrids in rural India, community wind farms in Brazil, even solar-powered street markets in Kenya. And they asked the one question that made the energy bosses sweat: if no one will bring the grid to us, why don't we build our own? The plan sounded insane. They didn't have money, licenses, or even new equipment. What they did have: a warehouse full of scrap metal, a stack of cracked mirrors from a hotel renovation, and about 200 dead batteries shipped in as electronic waste. Add in copper wires stripped from broken fans and a few stubborn minds, and suddenly the impossible didn't look so impossible. By the way, those dead batteries, once they were refurbished, they ran 87% as efficiently as new imports and cost literally nothing. Compare that to the $4 million price tag of the last government solar project that collapsed before producing a single kilowatt. So here's a question for you. If a group of volunteers can wire up an entire village with junk, what does that say about all those billion-dollar official projects that went nowhere? Drop your thoughts below, and if you think more people should hear this, you know what to do. The first week was pure chaos. They set up panels made from refurbished mirrors on bamboo frames, only to have half of them blown over by a sudden dust storm. The batteries, remember these were dead batteries, overheated twice in the first month. Once so badly that one of the engineers, Daniel, burned the tips of his fingers. But here's where it got interesting. Instead of calling it quits, they turned every screw-up into an upgrade. They dug shallow trenches to anchor the bamboo frames, coated the mirrors with a cheap resin made from tree sap to stop them from cracking in the heat, and built a battery cooling system out of old car radiators. Within 2 months, they were producing a steady 15 kilowatts, enough to run lights, fans, and a handful of refrigerators for the first 50 homes. That's when the whispers started. The local utility office sent inspectors who asked questions that had nothing to do with safety and everything to do with shutting them down. Where is your government license? Who authorized the grid connection? When the team explained they were completely off-grid, one inspector actually laughed and said, "That's not allowed either." Here's the twist. there was no actual law against it. They'd combed through every piece of energy legislation, and nowhere did it say a village couldn't produce its own power. The rules only mentioned selling electricity, something they weren't doing. Everything was free. So why the heat? Because if word got out that communities could power themselves without paying a cent to the grid, the whole business model of the energy giants would start to crack. That raises the question, when laws don't stop you, but powerful people still try to, what exactly are they protecting? If you've got an answer, I want to hear it in the comments. And if you think this story deserves more ears, share it right now before it disappears from the feed. Pressure from above. By month 4, the project's footprint had tripled. What started as 15 kilowatts grew to 47, enough to light 150 homes, run 3 water pumps, and power a small rice milling machine that had been idle for years. School attendance jumped by 22% because kids could finally study at night without choking on kerosene fumes. Even the tiny health clinic doubled its operating hours, storing vaccines in a fridge for the first time. That's when the first official letter arrived. Stamped in red, it came from the Regional Energy Authority, citing concerns over technical safety and unauthorized generation. The irony? The same month, the state-owned grid suffered 3 blackouts that lasted over 12 hours each, affecting 500,000 people. Not one inquiry was launched into that. 2 weeks later, the national broadcaster aired a segment claiming the village project posed serious fire hazards and possible environmental contamination. They quoted an independent expert who, when the team dug deeper, turned out to be on the payroll of one of the country's largest energy contractors. The numbers tell a different story. In those 4 months, the microgrid recorded a 98.4% uptime rate. The only outage lasted 17 minutes during a storm. Compare that to the national grid's average uptime in rural zones, 72%. Even more telling, energy production costs here were less than $0.04 per kilowatt hour, 1/5 of the national average. But the pushback wasn't just PR. Inspectors began showing up unannounced, often flanked by local police. They demanded to see non-existent operating permits and threatened fines of up to $5,000. The team kept their cool, knowing the law was on their side, at least for now. Here's the thing. Once a story like this gains traction, you either inspire imitation or trigger suppression. Guess which one the energy giants prefer? So let me ask you, if something works better, cleaner, and cheaper, but threatens powerful pockets, should it be allowed to survive? Drop your answer below, and if you think this question matters, hit that share button before we keep going. The open clash. The breaking point came at a regional energy conference in the capital. The project's lead engineer, Daniel, had been invited to speak on renewable innovation in developing markets. It sounded like recognition until he stepped onto the stage. Seated in the front row were executives from 3 of the largest power companies in the country, along with a deputy minister from the Department of Energy. 10 minutes into Daniel's presentation, after he showed side-by-side data comparing the microgrid's efficiency to the national grid, the deputy minister interrupted him. These figures are misleading and potentially dangerous to public understanding. But the numbers were public. They came from the Energy Authority's own monthly bulletins. For example, average outage duration per month. National Grid, 9.4 hours. Village Microgrid, 0.3 hours. Household energy cost. National average, $22 a month. Village, $0. Maintenance cost per kilowatt hour. National, $0.21. Village, $0.05. The room went tense. A journalist from an independent paper asked the deputy minister directly, if the village model is cheaper and more reliable, why not replicate it? The response was a cold, such systems undermine coordinated national infrastructure planning. Translation? They can't meter it, they can't bill it, and they can't control it. 2 days later, a draft bill quietly appeared in Parliament proposing that all energy generation, grid-connected or not, must be licensed by the central government, with annual fees starting at $10,000. For a self-funded village project, that's the equivalent of strangling it in the crib. Daniel's speech never made it to the evening news. The conference's official video was edited to cut his segment entirely, but a recording, shaky and grainy, had already leaked online. Within 48 hours, it racked up over 1.2 million views, and the comments section became a battlefield between supporters of community power and defenders of the centralized grid. Now, the question wasn't just about one village. It was about whether people should have the right to produce their own electricity at all. Where do you stand? Should power, both the kind that lights homes and the kind that controls them, be in the people's hands? Tell me below and share this so it doesn't disappear. When the world noticed, by the 6th month, the story had spilled far beyond the village. A German climate blog picked it up first, calling it proof that grassroots solutions can leapfrog fossil dependency. Then came a short segment on a Kenyan tech channel, comparing it to their own community solar farms. Within weeks, 3 foreign NGOs reached out, offering to fund expansions in exchange for branding rights. The team said no. Every time. The principle was simple. No logos, no corporate control, no strings. And that's exactly when the pressure at home intensified. Local police raided the storage shed twice in 1 week, claiming to be checking for hazardous materials. They left without finding a single violation, but not before confiscating a box of tools, 2 multimeters, and one of the refurbished inverters. No receipts, no paperwork. Then came the smear campaign. State TV aired a special report suggesting the project was secretly backed by foreign agents trying to destabilize national energy security. They even showed a blurred image of Daniel shaking hands with a European journalist, implying espionage. The truth? That handshake happened in broad daylight during a press tour, with 5 other reporters present. International reaction was swift. A coalition of environmental scientists from 12 countries signed an open letter demanding the government protect the microgrid as a model of sustainable development. The letter cited hard data: CO2 emissions avoided, 58 metric tons in 6 months. Water saved compared to coal power, 1.7 million liters. Average household income increase, 14% since electrification. But instead of protection, the ministry doubled down, accusing the scientists of interference in domestic affairs. And here's the irony: while accusing the village of being a foreign pawn, the same ministry had just signed a $400 million contract with an overseas energy conglomerate to build a centralized solar farm, 500 kilometers away from the areas that needed it most. So you tell me, when a homegrown solution works better, costs less, and reaches people faster, but gets crushed while imported projects get fast-tracked, is this really about progress or control? If you've got an answer, post it below. And if you think this shouldn't be buried under red tape and propaganda, share it now. The breaking point, month 8, was when the gloves came off. A formal cease and desist order landed at Daniel's door, threatening legal action if the microgrid didn't shut down within 14 days. The letter cited national energy integrity and unlicensed grid interference, the same vague phrases used to kill off dozens of small renewable startups in the past decade. But this time, the village didn't just comply quietly. They fought back, publicly. A petition was launched online, gathering over 300,000 signatures in just 5 days. Local newspapers ran headlines like, "Who owns the sun?" and "Why is clean power illegal?" Hashtags demanding the microgrid's protection began trending nationwide. In a bold move, Daniel released every technical document, wiring diagram, and maintenance log for the project online. Open source, free to download. Within a week, engineers in 3 other provinces had already begun building copycat systems. The government's problem had just multiplied. Economic pressure started to bite too. In the areas where community microgrids sprang up, grid electricity consumption dropped by up to 18%, cutting into the profits of the big suppliers. Share prices for the top 2 utility companies slid 7% in a single quarter. That's when Parliament fast-tracked the so-called Energy Harmonization Act, which would make all unlicensed generation, no matter how small, a criminal offense punishable by up to 2 years in prison. If it passes, the lights in this village go out, not because they failed, but because they succeeded too well. So here's the question: should laws protect public welfare or protect corporate revenue? You decide, and if you think the answer matters, pass this story on. The last stand, the 14-day deadline came and went. On the morning of the 15th day, police trucks rolled into the village, flanked by inspectors in bright vests. They carried sealed boxes for evidence collection and a portable generator, ironically powered by diesel, to secure the site. But they weren't alone. Hundreds of villagers were already waiting. Farmers, shopkeepers, students, all standing shoulder to shoulder around the battery shed. Some carried hand-painted signs, "The sun belongs to everyone. We light our own future." Daniel stepped forward with a folder under his arm. Inside were printed copies of the open-source plans, hundreds of them. He handed them out like leaflets, knowing that even if the system here was dismantled, the idea was already too widespread to kill. The standoff lasted hours. By late afternoon, the officials left without touching a single panel. No one said why. Maybe they feared the cameras. Maybe they realized that dismantling the project in front of the world would backfire harder than letting it run. 2 weeks later, the Energy Harmonization Act passed. On paper, the microgrid is now illegal. In practice, it's still running, quietly. The villagers call it the silent current. And the blueprints keep spreading, passed from hand to hand, village to village. 6 months on, there are now at least 14 known microgrids in the country, all modeled on the original. No one can say exactly how many more exist in secret. The government can chase them, but they can't chase the sun. So I'll leave you with this. Power isn't just electricity, it's the ability to choose your own future. And once people taste that, no law, no corporation, and no minister can take it away. If you believe that future should belong to everyone, say so, loudly. Comment, share, make them hear it. Because the moment we stop talking, that's when the lights really go out.